Here name itself indicates autogamy means what? The pollen grain of the same flower come in contact with the stigma of the same flower and pollination takes place. So the definition is, in this type, pollination is achieved within the same flower. Transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the same flower is called autogamy. Very commonly we observe this. If the flower is bisexual, then we can say autogamy is very common. But there is a special type here. In autogamy, we observe chasmogamous flowers and cleistogamous flowers. Okay, in simple words, if I draw a diagram here, suppose this is one plant producing a flower. Here, this flower is having androecium as well as gynoecium. What happens? Pollen grains which are released from this will deposit on the stigmatic surface and pollination takes place. And this we call it as autogamy. This is just a definition. Now observe what happens continuously when the pollen grain of the same flower fall on the stigmatic surface and pollination takes place, fertilization takes place, produced offsprings are which is exactly similar to their parents. There is a very little chance that they will have variation. Okay, so this is nothing but the self-pollination. Chasmogamous flower means flower will open and stigma will be get exposed, and on this exposed stigma the pollen grains of the same flower will dust on and they germinate and produces the pollen tube, and then fertilization takes place. Then what is cleistogamous flower? It's a type of flower which is completely closed, will never open. Okay, so the pollen grains, make sure that 100% the pollen grain of the same flower will pollinate the same that means stigma, that means they are deposited on the stigma. There is no chance that cross pollination may occur. In chasmogamous flower there is a chance the cross pollination may occur, but in cleistogamous there is 100% sure that the pollen of the same flower will be transferred to the stigma. Now what and all the examples are there? If you observe in viola, the common name is common pansy, oxalis and commelina. These are the three types of plants where you observe chasmogamous flowers, that means completely opened. Okay, and cleistogamous flowers are observed in groundnut plant. Hope you have seen the groundnut plant. The flowers are produced in the soil actually. Pollination confers inside and it sets the seed and the fruit. Okay, here they have not mentioned the example. Only for chasmogamous flower they have mentioned the example. But remember, for cleistogamous flower, example is groundnut. So in such flowers, the anther and stigma lie close to each other. When anther dehisces in the flower, pollen grains come in contact with the stigma to affect the pollination. Thus, cleistogamous flowers are invariably autogamous. This is very important. Invariably autogamous, as there is no chance of occurring pollen landing on the stigma. That means no chance of cross pollination. Cross pollination is avoided here. Self pollination is encouraged. So cleistogamous flowers produce assured seed set even in the absence of pollinators. These plants are not dependent on the pollinators. They know that the viable pollen grains produced in this plant will 100% make sure that pollination will take place. So do you think that cleistogamy is advantageous or disadvantageous to the plant? If it is advantageous, why? If it is disadvantageous, for that also you should give a reason why. So let me tell you why it is advantageous. One thing, there is no dependency on pollinators. Second thing, there is a high chance of pollination and fertilization. And plant make sure that its next offsprings will be produced. What is the disadvantage? There are some disadvantage. The thing is, produced all the offsprings are exactly identical to their parents. So in the course of evolution, this is not encouraged actually. Cross-pollination lead to variation, variation lead to the type of offsprings which are more adaptable to the environment. So that is what every organisms expected. So this type may not be present in most of the organisms, but observed in some of the plants like groundnut. Now, geitonogamy, this is very interesting. What is geitonogamy? It is somewhat like self-pollination only. Here, transfer of pollen takes place from anther to the stigma of the different flower of the same plant. So let us say that here there is one plant which is producing many flower like this. Here there is one flower, here another flower. Okay. Now transfer of pollen takes place from anther to the stigma of the another flower of the same plant. This is geitonogamy. Now tell me, this geitonogamy makes what difference compared to autogamy? They are almost same, because genetically offsprings are exactly similar to their parents, but this is cross-pollination similar to self-pollination. Okay, so transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of the another flower of the same plant. Although geitonogamy is functionally cross-pollination involving pollinating agents, genetically similar to autogamy. So whenever this type of statements are observed, you can expect assertion and reason type of questions from this. Suppose assertion is given like this: geitonogamy is similar to autogamy. Okay, that is the assertion. Reason what they will give: even though it is functionally cross-pollination involving a pollinating agents, genetically it is similar to autogamy. If they have given a reason, then assertion and reason both are correct, and reason is the correct explanation of assertion. Sometimes they will change the reason. At that time, please make sure that geitonogamy is similar to autogamy for one reason, that is, transfer of pollen takes place from anther to the stigma of the different flower of the same plant. That means genetic constitution is same. It is like self-pollination, but functionally it is cross-pollination, requires the pollinating agents. Now coming to xenogamy. This is interesting type of pollination. What happens here? Transfer of pollen grain takes place from anther to the stigma of the different flower of the same species. It is not of the same plant, of the same species. That means here there is one flowering plant. Here there is one more flowering plant. They all starts to bloom the flower. Now pollen grain from one flower with the help of pollinating agents reaches the another plant of the same species, and pollination takes place. Please do remember, there are certain chemicals on the stigmatic surface which have the ability to recognize the pollen grain of the same species and pollen grain of the different species. Okay, so let us consider these two are the same species of plants, and at the same time they shown a flowering. Now what happens in the true cross pollination, that is in xenogamy? This is plant A, this is plant B. Pollen from the anthers are transferred to the stigma of the another flower of the different plant, but they belong to same species. Okay, so this is only a type of pollination which during pollination brings genetically different types of pollen grains to the stigma. So here offspring produced will have a slight variation, not exactly similar to their parents. They will have a variation. Why there is a variation? Because it is a true cross pollination. Okay. Now the next concept is agents of pollination. In order to transfer the pollen grain from anther to the stigma, either we require wind or we require water or pollinating agents like insects, snails, ants, birds, animals, etc. Okay, so they are acting as agents of pollination. Plants use two abiotic factors like wind and water and one biotic factor, that is animals, to achieve the pollination. Pollination is a very beautiful process. In early morning, you just visit your garden and observe the activity of insects. Suppose if you observe butterflies, they specifically visit certain plants and they actually they take reward from the flowers, they take the nectars. At the same time, when they visit different flowers, they come up with the pollination. Okay, similarly the honeybees, they also visit different flowers to achieve the pollination, but their primary intention is to get the reward. Who will give the reward? Flowers. In turn, what they will get? They will get the pollination. Okay, majority of the plants use biotic agents for pollination. Majority of the plants, we observe the pollination takes place with the help of insects or birds or animals. Now only a small portion of the plant use abiotic agents, either by water pollination or by wind pollination. Pollen grains coming in contact with the stigma is a chance factor in both wind and water pollination. So if you observe a type of plant which is showing pollination with the help of wind and water, they produce numerous pollen grains and flowers are very small. Do you think why this adaptation is there? Because if the pollen grain are carried by the wind, suppose one flowering plant is here, another flowering plant is here, and wind direction in this, then what happens? Produce all the pollen grains will be just wasted. So what happens? They produce numerous pollen grains, thousands of pollen grains. If in case the wind direction in this, here there is one plant which gets pollinated, so it's a chance factor. But in the case of insect pollination or animal pollination, if the flower has a reward, in the early morning these insects or butterflies, they visit each and every flower to collect the reward. There is a high chance it undergoes the pollination and fertilization. So that's why whenever plant is dependent on abiotic factor like water and wind, then they need to produce a large number of pollen grains and very small flowers, because if there is no insect pollination, there is no need to produce a colorful petals or any type of rewards. Okay, to compensate for this uncertainties and associated loss of pollen grains, the flower produce enormous amount of pollen when compared to the number of ovules available for pollination. Usually in abiotic pollinating flowers, one ovary will contain one ovule. Even though they have one ovule, they produce numerous pollen grains. The reason is there is a high chance that these pollen grains will get wasted. Okay, so pollination by wind is more common amongst abiotic pollinations. Wind pollination also requires that pollen grains are light. So these are the very important characters. Say in examination, what type of questions may appear from this? They will give the question like this: select the incorrect statement with respect to wind pollination. In that, they include certain important aspects like what and all are the characteristics of wind pollinated flower. One thing, pollen grains are light. Why there is a need of producing light pollen grains? Because it has to be carried by the wind. If they are heavy, then it is not possible. That is why the pollen grain produced are lightweight. Second thing, they are non-sticky. Why they are non-sticky? There is no reason to stick on to the body of pollinators. That is why they are non-sticky. Okay, then they often possess well-exposed stamens. Well-exposed stamens help in waving in the wind and pollen grains are easily released. Then, and large, often feathery stigma. See, feathery stigma helps in trapping the pollen grains. Imagine there is one strong wind current, thousands of pollen grains are released to the environment. Now, the stigma having a small hair-like structures can trap these pollen grains easily. If there is no such things, then the pollen grain deposit on the stigmatic surface, chance of deposition will be very, very less. Okay. So wind pollinated flowers often have single ovule. This is one more character in each ovary and numerous flowers packed into a inflorescence. Numerous flowers are packed into a compact inflorescence. Why? Because if flowers are very close to each other, there is a high chance they may get pollination from the wind current. Okay. So a familiar example is corn cob. So in textbook they have given one diagram, and the term which is used here, corn cob, is slightly different. Okay, the inflorescence of maize plant where small flowers are produced, it's correct, a male inflorescence, and female flowers are produced in corn cob, that is different. So here don't get confused. Okay, feathery inflorescence in maize plant is produced at the top. So here actually what they have given, corn cob, is actually a group of stigma and style which is coming out of the corn cob. It is not the inflorescence. Okay. So wind pollination is quite common in grasses. So wherever you see monocot plants or grass, not monocot, in grasses, which is very common, wind pollination. Now next one is pollination by water. Pollination by water. See, abiotic factor like wind, they play some more role in pollination. But when it comes to water pollination, very limited genera of plants, they show pollination by water. But just remember the previous topics, like in morphology of flowering plants, as well as in plant kingdom. Especially in plant kingdom, we studied that algae, bryophytes, gymnosperms, they mainly dependent on water, and their distribution is also restricted to confined area, very small area, because of the complete dependency of plant on the water for fertilization. But just observe the flowering plants. Now the scenario get completely changed, because these flowering plants, they are concentrating more on the pollinators, biotic pollinators, not on the abiotic component to act as a medium for pollination. So that is why only 30 genera of plants, they are confined to water pollination. So how this water pollination takes place? See, don't get confused. Hydrophytic plants, they grow in water, on the surface of the water sometimes they are completely submerged. The plants which are growing on the water surface, that means they are floating on the water surface because of buoyancy, they produces the flowers and which are colorful, and they are pollinated by the insects. Okay, here water is not acting as a medium to conduct the pollination, but some plants, they are completely submerged and they require water current to reach their male gametes to the female gametes. Let us see how this water pollination takes place and how plants are evolved for this mechanism. Now, pollination by water is quite rare. As I said, it is found only in 30 genera of mostly monocotyledons. Very important, mostly monocotyledons. Okay, so this may be a very important key point for competitive exam. 30 genera and mostly monocotyledons. Because what they will do, they just twist the sentence like this: pollination by water is quite rare in flowering plants and it is limited to about 30 genera, mostly dicotyledons. Like this, they will change the sentence while framing the question. So you should be very careful that most of the water pollinated plants, they are monocotyledons. As against this, you would recall that water is a regular mode of transport in lower plants like algae, bryophytes and gymnosperms. So that is why their distribution is restricted to a small geographical area. The reason is, if there is no water, there is no fertilization of gametes. Some examples of water pollinated plants are Vallisneria, Hydrilla. So these two are freshwater examples, okay, plants which grow in the freshwater. Vallisneria and Hydrilla. I will show you the picture in the next slide. And several marine seagrass such as Zostera. So Zostera is one more example which grow in salt water. Okay. Now, not all aquatic plants use water for pollination, as I explained. In the case of water hyacinth and water lily, it's a different scenario. They have a buoyancy, they float on the surface of water, and pollination takes place by insects. Now observe here, this is Vallisneria, very commonly observed in fish tank. Okay, so this plant is grown in the fish tank so that it will be a artificial aquatic medium for the fish in the fish tank. Here what happens, male flowers are completely submerged and female flowers, they reach the surface. So these male flowers, when they release the pollen grains passively reaches the surface of water, and through the water current, these male gametes will reach the stigma and pollination takes place. I will show you certain beautiful adaptations which are observed in Vallisneria at the time of pollination. This is Hydrilla and this is seagrass, that we call it as Zostera. Okay. Now just observe the pictures. This is water hyacinth. This plant is very important plant to remember in its ecological impact. The reason is, this plant mainly undergo reproduction by asexual method, by forming an offset. So whenever this plant is introduced to a new niche like a freshwater lake, within very short interval of time they spread to all the area and cause trouble. They are also known as terror of Bengal. If you look at the beautiful flowers, they are very beautiful because they can attract the insects for pollination. Even though they are hydrophytic plants, they attract insect for pollination. They are not pollinated by the water. Here if you observe this plant, hope you all know this plant, right? This is lotus plant. So here we can also call it as water lily. Flowers are so beautiful, which attracts lot of insects for pollination. Plant is hydrophytic. Okay, so those two are the exceptions. Now here if you come and observe, this is the Vallisneria. Just observe the female flowers, how beautiful they are. Look at their stalk of the flower. It is like a spring. Why? Sometimes what happens, surface of the water will go down. Sometimes because of rush of water level will increase. But the intention of the flower is to reach the surface of water in order to get pollinated by the pollen grains. So this spiral arrangement of floral stalk help the flower to adjust their height according to the level of water. And this flower, which is completely submerged, is the male flower, and that produces the pollen grain. Here a slight water surface they have mentioned, and on that so many pollen grains are there. Those pollen grains, with the help of water current, reaches the surface of the flower, female flower, and pollination takes place. Now this is seagrass. Slight difference. See, all these concepts are very important for competitive exam. See, in the case of Vallisneria, female flower reaches the surface, but in the case of seagrass, in Zostera, male and female flowers both are completely submerged. Okay, now pollen grains, they are released in the water, not on to the surface. They are released in the water, and with the help of water current, pollination takes place. Now one thing is very important here, how these pollen grains do not undergo wet. They have a special mucilaginous coating that protect the pollen grain not undergoing wetting. Okay, and then when they reach the female flower, pollination takes place. So when you look at these two plants, whether they are unisexual flowers or bisexual flowers, there may be a chance that they will ask a conceptual based question on this. See, they produce male flower as well as female flower. So the plants are unisexual plants, but it produces flowers, they are unisexual, but plants are monoecious. Okay. So this concept is very, very important. You should have a clear idea whether they are monoecious or dioecious, as well as they are unisexual or bisexual. Okay. So same thing is explained here, how the pollination takes place. That is what I explained with the help of this diagram. Now this is very, very interesting part. How the pollination takes place with the help of insects. So far we studied the abiotic factor which is responsible for pollination. Here onwards we will study how the biotic factor they involve in pollination, because majority of the plants they depend on biotic factor for pollination. Just observe here, I included the slide where one beetle is pollinating the flower. Here there is one more picture where one wasp is pollinating the flower. Here one flies. Here you can see wherever there is dirty things or fecal material, you observe these flies. These flies also sometimes they undertake pollination. Here you can see a beautiful butterfly is pollinating. Here honeybees, you know the importance of honeybees. Honeybees, they are major pollinators. Without honeybees, we cannot imagine our life. The earth is completely dependent on these honeybees. Whatever the food we are taking today, it is all because of their effort. Okay, so honeybees, they every morning they visit the flower and pollinate it. And here you can see an ant undertaking pollination. Okay, so majority of the flowering plants use a range of animals as pollinating agents. Under that, bees, butterflies, flies, beetles, wasp, ant, moth, birds, especially sunbirds and hummingbirds, and bats are common pollinating agents. In the next slide, I will show you other pictures also. Okay, among the animals, insects, particularly bees, are the dominant biotic pollinating agents. So the bees, they play very important role. Now just observe this. Here one picture where you can observe a large animal pollinating the flower. So it's a mammal. Okay, lemur. It is called lemur. It's a primate which undertake pollination sometimes. Then arboreal tree dwelling rodents. Here you can see the rodents. They are pollinating this flower. Okay, and sometimes lizards like zicco lizards and garden lizard. Garden lizards are very common, but observe this zicco lizard. Okay, it's a zicco lizard that also sometimes undertake pollination. So they are all expecting floral reward. What is the floral reward? See, if nothing is there, why should they come in contact with the flower? Whenever they come in contact with the flower, they should get something in return of that. So that's why they are visiting the flower. The beautiful petals are actually attracting these organisms towards it, and the sweet nectar produced by the flower help them to have some amount of nutrition from the flower. So because of that rewards, these organisms will visit the flower and conduct the pollination. Okay, often flowers of animal pollinated plants are specifically adapted for particular species of animals. So it is all evolutionary aspect. All the flowers are not visited by all the insects or all the animals. Here there is a specific interaction between the particular plant and a particular animal. Over a course of evolution, these two organisms they coexisted. One will give the reward, and another one will help in pollination. So this is how we observe coexistence of animals and plants. Now, majority of the insect pollinated flowers are large, colorful, fragrant and rich in nectar. I said this is mainly because to attract the insects. Then when the flowers are small, a number of flowers are clustered into inflorescence to make them conspicuous. You just observe this picture, okay? You will have some type of idea here. See, this is the flower of the grass. What you can observe from this picture, flowers are very small and they are not attractive. You can say it is inconspicuous, but they become conspicuous. You can see that flower only because they all clustered compactly on the inflorescence, so that they can be appeared. But plants usually they do not dependent on the insects for pollination. In grass it is mainly because of wind, but there are some plants where they produce small flowers, but they are all clustered only to attract the insects. So when small flowers together, it looks like a large flower and they can attract insects easily, and cross pollination takes place with the help of insects. Animals are attracted to flowers by color and fragrance. You know that whenever in the early morning, if you visit your garden, flowers will have a beautiful fragrance. Why they have fragrance? We all are stimulated when we have a beautiful fragrance. Similarly, even insects and birds also get attracted when they have a very pleasant fragrance. Now, the flowers pollinated by flies and beetles secrete foul odor. You know that whenever there is a excretory material, whenever there is a carcass, these flies are attracted. Why? Because that pungent smell or that odor which is coming out of that decaying material attracts these flies. So in order to mimic that, there are certain plants, they produce the flower which produces a foul smell so that flies can be attracted to that. But the intention of the plant is to have pollination with the help of those flies. Okay. To sustain animals visit, the flowers have to provide a reward to the animals in the form of nectars or in the form of pollen grains. Okay, so those are the floral rewards. See, there are some organisms, they are called pollen robbers. See, what they will do, they just rob the pollen grains or nectar from the flower, but they do not undertake pollination. Okay, so this type of organisms also exist in the nature. For harvesting the rewards from the flower of the animals visitor come in contact with the anther and the stigma. The body of the animal gets coated of pollen grains, which are generally sticky and animal pollinated flowers. So one thing we need to remember when we are studying the abiotic factor like wind pollination, there we studied that pollen grains are non-sticky and lightweight, but here it is opposite. Here pollen grains are sticky and heavy. So whenever these insects they enter the flower, so usually their back surface has small hair-like structure. All these pollen grains are dusted on their body surface and it is sticky. That's why pollen grains can easily stick on to their surface. When they visit another flower, so these pollen grains come in contact with the stigma and pollination takes place. So when the animal carrying pollen on its body come in contact with the stigma, it brings about the pollination. Here you can see hummingbird which is taking nectar from the flower. You can see this in your garden every day. Hummingbirds early in the morning, they visit every flower and collect the nectar from it, because very little amount of nectar will be available in the flower. And this is the bat. Usually in the night time, bats they undertake pollination. Okay, so these plants are adapted in such a way that they bloom the flower, or anthesis of the flower takes place in the night. Now let me show you one wonderful picture here. Can you see here there are people standing over and taking pictures? Look at the flower size. Amazing, right? Why? Because this is Amorphophilus. In different language, we call it in a different name. In Hindi, it is called Zamin Kant. In Kannada, it is called Suvarnagadde. We call it different names, but scientific name is Amorphophilus. So, what is the importance of this flower? Whenever this flower bloom or open, it produces very pungent smell, just like a carcass. and it attracts many type of flies, then moths, and then small animals and snakes. So see, these organisms come and visit this flower in order to get some reward, and some organisms, they lay their egg in the flower. So when the environment is favorable, this egg hatches and produces the young ones inside the flower. Okay, so this is how this plant gets the help of animals or flies to get pollinated. So same thing is given here. It may grow up to 6 feet flower. Okay, a small relationship exists between the species of moth and the plant yucca. This I will show you in the next picture. Here you can see this is yucca plant. Okay, here you can see the shape of the leaf. In garden, they usually grow this plant. This is the very big inflorescence. Each one is a flower. Now here I have shown a part of the flower where you can observe the stigma and pollen grains. This is the moth. So there is a coexistence between this moth and the yucca plant. What it will do, moth visit the flower, undertake the pollination, and they lay their egg. So there is an interaction. This egg hatch inside the flower, in the sense when it undergo pollination. The seeds will make sure that growing this moth will get sufficient nutrient. At the same time, flower get pollinated. Okay, so those interactions are very important for the competitive exams. Remember, okay? Then outbreeding devices. This is again a very, very important concept. What is outbreeding device actually? See, most of the plants, they show self-pollination, because self-pollination assures that fertilization takes place and plant can produce the seed, and seed will germinate and produces the next generation. But what happens when continuous self-pollination takes place? There is a high chance that inbreeding depression will take place. In the sense, for over a period of time, because of same genes, the offsprings may not be able to adjust to the changing environmental conditions, so that plant may undergo extinction. So majority of the plants, they try to encourage cross-pollination rather than having self-pollination. Even though they are bisexual, they encourage cross-pollination over self-pollination. So this outbreeding devices are the tools through which plants they achieve cross-pollination over self-pollination. We will study one by one what and all the types of outbreeding devices are present in plants. So hermaphrodite flower means what? It has both androecium and gynoecium. Okay, the bisexual flower. Continued self-pollination results in inbreeding depression. Even in animals also we can see this inbreeding depression. So what happens? Sometimes continuous self-pollination, at one point of time, lethal gene may express or unwanted gene may express, and that particular offsprings are not able to survive in that environment. So in order to avoid that, what animals or plants do, they encourage the cross-pollination. So flowering plants have developed many devices to discourage self-pollination and to encourage the cross-pollination. Those are, in some species, pollen release and stigma receptivity are not synchronized. That means, imagine there is a bisexual flower. It produces androecium as well as gynoecium, but the maturity of pollen grains and the receptivity of stigma are not synchronized. So when the stigma get receptive, pollen grains are not even matured. So what happens? The nearby same species plant, when it produces mature pollen grains, with the help of wind or insects, come and deposit it on the stigmatic surface and cross-pollination takes place. Even though plants are bisexual, here in the case of this condition, we call it as protandry or protogyny. Either androecium is mature first or gynoecium mature first. Okay, so these are the technical terms, not given. But remember, protandry means androecium matures first. Protogyny means gynoecium matures first. Okay, so with the help of a slight change in the maturation of gynoecium and androecium, these plants, they achieve the cross-pollination. Either the pollen is released before the stigma becomes receptive, or the stigma becomes receptive much before the release of pollen. So this is how cross pollination is achieved. Some other species, the anther and stigma are placed different positions so that pollen cannot come in contact with the stigma. So this is the positional change. Imagine stigma reaches a very height and pollen grains are produced at the base. Now these pollen grains cannot be deposited on the stigmatic surface or vice versa. Pollen anther is long and stigma is short, and in between there will be a physical barrier. Then pollen grains cannot dust on the stigmatic surface. So this is how they discourage self-pollination and encourages the cross-pollination. Both these devices prevent autogamy. So just recollect the kinds of pollination. Autogamy means what? It is a self-pollinated flower where there is a guarantee that pollen of the same plant come in contact with the stigma of the same flower. But that will not happen here. Autogamy will not take place. Again, this is very important concept in theory, in CET and in NEET. Why? Because now they are connecting this topic with the kinds of pollination. The third device to prevent the inbreeding is self-incompatibility. Self-incompatibility means bisexual flower produces the pollen grains and to viable pollen grains, but this viable pollen grains unable to germinate on the stigma because there will be certain chemicals which will detect the self pollen and will not allow this pollen to germinate on the stigmatic surface. So the pollen from another plant of same species can germinate on this stigma. This condition we call it as self-incompatibility. So this is the genetic mechanism. Very important. This is the genetic mechanism. In all these outbreeding devices, which one is the genetic mechanism actually? Self-incompatibility is the genetic mechanism and prevents self-pollen from the same flower or other flowers of the same plant from fertilizing the ovule by inhibiting pollen germination or pollen tube growth in the pistil. As I explained, there will be a genetic mechanism which will detect the self pollen from the same flower or the different flowers of the same plant. By that, it will completely avoid autogamy as well as geitonogamy. Another device to prevent the self-pollination is the production of unisexual flowers. So obviously, when there is a unisexual flowers, the plant has to depend completely on cross-pollination. So in the cross-pollination, there is high chance that pollen grains will be carried by the insects or any type of birds or any type of wind. So this pollen grain is from the different plant belonging to same species. Okay. So in several species such as papaya, male and female flowers are present on the different plants. So this is one best example for dioecious plant. Okay. So that is each plant is either male or female. You can correlate this particular example with the date also. In date plants also you can observe male plant and female plant. So there is a high chance that these flowers undergo cross-pollination. This condition prevents both autogamy and geitonogamy. As I said, autogamy means a self-pollen will pollinating the flower. Geitonogamy means pollen from the different flower of the same plant pollinating the flower. Both will not take place in this case. So one is self-incompatibility. Second thing is unisexual flowers. So far we studied 4 different types under outbreeding devices. The first one is protandry and protogyny. Second thing, heterostyly. That means the length of the anther and the filament and length of the style is different. And the third one is self-incompatibility, and the fourth one is unisexuality. Remember these 4 words. Keep these 4 words in your mind. It's very, very, very important topic. Okay. So what is the most important aspect of outbreeding device? To encourage cross-pollination over self-pollination. So the next topic is pollen pistil interaction.